In this segment, several short clips from the lesson on the solar system are coupled with commentary from Nicole Chase, the featured teacher. After each clip, she provides insight about her thinking. She explains the process she uses for planning, the rationale for her instructional decisions, how she incorporates literacy, and her focus on students as constructors of their own knowledge.
Okay, we've been talking about space for a few days, and we're going to focus on 2 questions today. And so we have a list of all of our questions on the backboard. The orange sentence strips over there, those are the 2 questions we're focusing on today. How do the planets move through space? And Olivia, can you see the second question?
Yeah. How does the Earth's movement affect our lives?
In the beginning of the lesson, I am reminding them of their schema that we've talked about for the first 2 days. Any questions that they've had on space, they have those written down in their notebooks. And I'm reminding them of our 2 essential questions. Part of my planning also is I have to teach to the Colorado State standards, and so I'm looking at those standards as I'm planning and knowing that for space, the 3rd graders are required to know how space affects their everyday lives. And so we've done a lot of work with that just in the past 2 days, and so that knowing the standards helps me better create my essential questions, and one of my essential questions is how does space affect our daily lives? And so we'll come back to that several times during this lesson so they're reminded of what they need to be thinking about. The first 2 days of the lesson, the children were generating their own questions about space. Anything that they wonder about, they're writing down, and I had those turned into me, and so last night I took those home and I'm looking through all the questions that they've had, and they run the gamut from why do we have gravity, how much would I weigh on Jupiter, do satellites really affect our cell phones? The questions are all over the board, and so I'm trying to kind of categorize those questions that help me better understand where the kids are starting with their schema so I know where to take the lesson to further their learning, because I have some learners that have some great schema on space already. I can tell by the questions that they're asking. So then I know how to extend my lesson for my advanced learners. I also know how I can reformulate questions for my learners that might not understand anything about space yet. We have some kiddos in the classroom that don't have any schema about space. And so I take their questions that they're asking to make sure that I'm designing my lesson to meet my kids' needs. Remember how yesterday Lucas was the sun and Miss Chase was the earth, and so what was I doing?
You were rotating. Orbiting.
What was this?
Spinning. Orbiting. Rotating.
And then I went clear around Lucas yesterday, and that's the orbiting, right. We're going to be planets today. And you're going to actually get to orbit something around a star. And then at the end, you're going to get the chance to answer these 2 questions. How do the planets move through space? And how does the Earth's movement affect our lives? So keep those in the back of your brain while we're doing this today. Okay, because we're going to come back to those. You're going to get the chance to write about it. And then at the end, we're going to turn and talk so you can share out your ideas. Okay? So here I've walked them through what the lesson's going to look like. I've talked about reconnecting their schema, their prior knowledge, to what we've talked about the first 2 days. I've talked about how they're going to actually do a hands-on experiment to better understand how space affects their daily lives. And then I've also let them know that in the end they need to expect to share their thinking either with a partner on the floor or out loud with the group. So then they're ready to know what the schedule is for the lesson. Tori, yes, you'll need one. Grace? So here they've prepared their science notebooks. We've used science notebooks all year long, and we've talked about how scientists need to be aware of their thinking, and so they know where they're going. The kids are, everything to do with science they're writing in their notebook because scientists need to look back at their notebook to explain their thinking or to remind themselves of what their learning has been in the past. Last night I had typed out the questions, and after yesterday's lesson I had the children glue in a sentence strip that I had pre-typed for them, so we're ready to go today. So there isn't any fussing with paperwork or where do I find this paper to glue in, or we're ready to go right out of the chute today. If you look at your model on your paper, we have 4 questions. Number 1 is making the model, and that's done. Number 2, what is a satellite in this model? We're going to talk about that. Number 3, what is the satellite orbiting? So there's that. In their science notebook, you'll see things that are glued in, and it looks like a worksheet has been glued in, and what that is it's framing their learning to know, for them to understand what I'm expecting them to look back on. And so there's the model drawn out for them of the model that they're going to use today.
And so that's already been glued in there for them. And a lot of my learners need to have something up close that they can see rather than something up on the board. Visually, sometimes some of them can't see, or it needs to be in bright colors, or some of them just have tracking problems from the board back to what's on their lap. And so I want to eliminate all of those things by them having their notebooks out. And we've done this since day one of our notebooks, which was in early fall. And so now it's spring. And so they're used to dealing with these science notebooks, so they're not rustling papers, they're not doodling, they know what my expectations are for their learning, and so you'll see that they're pretty serious about their learning with their notebooks.
What do objects represented by your fist? So you're going to be looking at what is my fist doing, thinking about what that represents. And I'm just going to hold on to this washer. That's all that this is going to do.
So here I'm showing them how to actually use the model. I've pre-created these for the kids. Last week I knew that this was going to be a lesson I was going to teach this week, and so I've gotten together all the styrofoam balls, all the washers. The fishing line was pre-cut, and I had some teacher friends help me tie everything together. And then before I taught this lesson, I made sure that I did a trial run. So I was spinning this ball around my head to make sure that it's not going to fly off, or that the fishing line was tied tight enough. And so those are things that could happen with kids that could distract the lesson. And so as I'm talking them through this lesson, I'm showing them exactly how they're going to be using this hands-on experiment so they know what to expect when they stand up and it's their turn.
Okay, I'm going to stop doing this. I want you to turn and talk to your neighbors. What are you thinking?
I think the ball is.
Join you guys?
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
I think the ball is a planet, and our head is the sun.
You mean your fist?
Yeah. No.
Oh.
I think your head is the sun. Yeah. Because it's going around in your head.
Yeah. I think your fist is the sun because think about it. The ball is right here. And
This turn and talk method is a method that we've been using since we've been building our community. We've done community building for the first 3 months of school, and it's ongoing. It's peppered into our everyday lives. It's building our community. And so this turning and talk method of sharing their thinking allows me to get out from in front of the class, and I get to roam around, to bend down and actually sit next to the kiddos and hear their conversations that they're having. And that also gives me a chance to ask clarifying questions. And so that's a great time for me to jot a note down about a certain student's questioning or learning. And that's an informal way of my assessment. I can see if they're understanding what I've said so far, or if I need to extend their learning in the next phase of the lesson. That's a really quick way for me to get around while they're doing their thinking and get back to the front before they're finished.
Okay, I'm seeing that groups are getting done because you're turning back to me.
Okay.
If you need to finish a few minutes, that's okay. Finish your thought and then turn back. Let's see, who have we not heard from yet? Avery, help us out.
I'm thinking the satellite might be the ball. Or not the ball, but the straw on
The straw on the string? Why are you thinking that?
I'm not sure, but I know the ball's a planet and the fist is the sun.
Okay.
Swing, if it's a straw, what is that doing?
Let's think about what we talked about, what a satellite is in general.
In this lesson, I'm spending a lot of time making sure the kids understand the hands-on learning experiment. I don't want them to go into this experiment blind, not knowing what the different parts of the experiment represent in real life. And so I spend a lot of time explaining that, asking clarifying questions so I know that the learners know what they're going to be doing. And it's better time spent in the long run. You know, if you do a lot of the work up front, it's easier in the end for the kids learning.
What's the satellite in this model? What's orbiting?
Ball.
The ball?
It's orbiting around the sun, which is the star.
Okay. Okay, so write your thinking down on number 2. If you think that that's the ball, let's get that thinking down. Does anyone have different thinking for that?
I like to give the learners a chance to write in their science notebooks as the lesson is happening. If I wait till the end of the lesson for them to share their thinking, it's old thinking for them by then, because we have learned so much in just this hour, or they have listened to so many different conversations and new thinking from other learners that perhaps their thinking would have been lost had they not written it down. And by them also writing that down, it gives me a paper trail to see what their thinking is. I'll collect these notebooks to see what their process was throughout my lesson. And I use that not only as an assessment, but also a teaching tool for myself. Was I teaching this lesson effectively? It's also a learning tool for me, for my teaching.
The ball.
And do satellites orbit?
Yes.
Is my straw orbiting anything?
No.
So if we know that satellites orbit, what's our choice here?
The ball.
Okay. Tessa, give that a go.
The ball is the string is gravity because it's holding the ball so the ball doesn't like fly away somewhere.
That's really smart to think of the string as gravity because we're not quite there yet. That was good thinking. Okay, so in the model, now think about this. I don't have an actual sun, so what is this satellite?
As I'm teaching and I'm trying to draw the thinking out of students, I always ask for new thinking. Even though I might have received the correct answer, I want to make sure that all of my learners have a chance to share new thinking. And so I'll never stop once I get the correct answer. You'll notice that the children, when they're sharing their thinking, they phrase it in "this is my thinking" rather than "my answer is." Because it's not about the answer, it's about the process of getting there.
Or my fist. You can write either one of those down. Question.
Would the planet ever stop moving around the sun?
Okay, let's think about that. Does the planet ever
I
stop?
love when kids share their thinking because it gives me a picture of who they are as learners, but it also allows the other learners in the classroom to recognize that perhaps they're not understanding the conversation that's happening. You'll see a kiddo asking a clarifying question because he's confused, and so that's teaching the other kiddos in this class that it's okay to be confused.
Lucas, question?
Back to Marcelino's question.
Okay.
If the Earth stopped moving, then that means the time would freeze.
It would.
Very interesting. Think about that. So if we predict that the Earth stops moving tomorrow, then you're saying, Lucas, that time will stop. Yeah. Okay.
Because if the world stops, we couldn't go to bed, go to sleep, eat lunch. Because it would be just like this.
Sometimes I have to go with the kids' thinking because that's where their brain is at the time. If I press my lesson forward, they're going to be so distracted by their own thinking that didn't get answered that they're not going to be learning from me. Sometimes I think it's okay to take the lead of the children, keeping in the back of my mind that I do need to be teaching to the Colorado standards, that I still have a responsibility as a teacher to get certain things taught.
Here's what I'd like for us to have happen. Let's do groups of 2 and see how we do. Your fist or your sun's going to be right in front of you. Your other hand should be holding the straw so your satellite can orbit.
When they were not in the classroom, I stood in the different places to see how they could orbit this styrofoam ball without hitting one another, without tangling up the fishing line. I had to cut my fishing line shorter because the first few that I made were too long and I knew that they would hit each other. And so it's really important that I try out my lessons, the parts that affect the kids directly, before I teach it, so I know what little mishaps could happen and fix those in advance.
Felicity, I'm waiting for you. Gentlemen, are we ready? Okay, each of you are going to have a turn, so you need to decide who goes first, and it doesn't matter because then the other partner will have a turn. So if you are the one that's doing the model, step away so you don't bonk somebody. And now we're going to talk about, we've ordered our planets. Now think about how far out our orbits are. We talked about that yesterday. Neptune is the furthest planet from the sun. What's the sun in your model? Your fist. Your fist. Your fist.
I think part of the reason why this lesson works is the kids are so on fire for learning about space. They really want to get this hands-on approach so they can try it. And they're dying to share their thinking at the end. And knowing that they have that opportunity, they're really focused on their learning right now. They're not messing around. They're not spinning their orbits out of control. They're really invested in their learning.
Okay, you're going to pull your washer down and you're going to go to Mercury. 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 Okay, I'd like for you to trade with your partner. Let your partner have a chance. Okay, models down.
I believe it's so important at the end of every lesson, whatever I do, if it's a writing lesson or a reading lesson, science lesson, that we come back and we have some share time. It's a time for them to be thinking about their thinking.
How do the planets move through space? What's the movement that we just modeled? Orbit. A revolution, revolving. What else do they do? I want you to write down all your thinking. I'm just going to give you a few minutes to write that down. If you need to draw a picture, I want you to draw a picture so you can remember your thinking.
At the end of this lesson, they're writing in their science notebooks again. When we first started science notebooks, it was cumbersome. We got the eye rolling and not the notebooks again, but now it's second nature to them and they love to look back on their learning, so they know that if they do a good job now, it will help them in the future. It will give me a better picture of who they were in this lesson. How did they learn? The notebooks are my way of assessing how my lesson went. I need to be open to the fact that I have different learners with different needs. Some of my kids do need to draw pictures, and some of them need to draw pictures in color. So I need to be having the colored pencils readily available for my kiddos. Some of my kids can write their thinking down in paragraph form, and that's okay. Just what works for them. It's their communication between themselves and me for their notebook.
And then I'm going to ask for a couple kids to share some of their thinking. Everybody's eager. I'm just going to draw a stick, I think.
I have different ways of pulling that thinking out of kids. I will directly ask the kiddos. Sometimes I pull sticks because oftentimes you'll have the same kids wanting to share their thinking, and the more shy kids don't get an opportunity. And so when I pull sticks, that tells the learners that they need to be on their game, because they might be pulled, and if I put their stick back into the bucket, it might get pulled again. And so they're not able to take time off from their thinking.
What did Tessa share with us? What's this stand for?
Gravity. If there's no gravity, like let's say you let go of that string, the ball would just go flying. And
If this string was not here and I've spun this around, let's say the string broke, the gravity breaks, where would this satellite go?
it would fall.
When I design my lessons for my learners, or scientists in this case, I want to make sure that I'm hitting the needs of all of my learners. So I'm scaffolding my lesson to make sure that my learners with special needs, their needs are getting met. My advanced learners, their needs are getting met.
The ball is spinning fast.
When my advanced learners are sharing their thinking, I always make it a point to ask them more of a probing question. They still need to be challenged, and so I'm making sure that I'm asking them those challenging questions so they have something in the back of their minds to think about for tomorrow. Or they might ask a question and I say, you know, that's a great idea for your homework tonight. Be thinking about